Hey there, this is chapter 4, titled Rest in Peace, from the book Being While Knowing That You're Not. And we continue on 12/19/03, where I write, "What has been going on lately is that I have been losing my interest in my own thoughts. Sometimes I'll be 2 sentences into a conversation with my wife or a friend, and then I'll see the long string of thoughts that I'll have to complete before I express the sentiment completely, and then I find myself losing interest real quick. If history is any indicator, then this too shall pass, but until then, I sense a quiet spell coming on. Not too long ago, I came to the realization that I have been doing this, participating in manifestation, for what may as well be 1 billion years. Actually, the realization was that the unmanifest and the manifest are 2 halves of the same whole. But from this realization, it was inferred that manifestation will always exist, and therefore I will be doing this, participating in manifestation, for what may as well be another 1 billion years. I'm not sure what feeling that gives you when reading that particular sentiment, but how I felt when coming to this was sweet liberation, because I found that you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want. There is no rush to get anything done, and you are literally on a permanent vacation. If you feel inclined to spend a vast chunk of your infinite vacation on imagining that you must get this or that done, whether it be making $1 million or getting enlightenment, then so be it, as this could enrich your vacation as well. Whatever you enjoy doing, then do it because, whatever you enjoy doing, then do it, whether it be writing out your thoughts, practicing yoga, playing video games, smoking crack in an alley, or running for president. It just doesn't seem to matter, because it's all play of imagination, and it is my distinct impression that anything done in this realm of imagination is always and naturally gravitating towards love and harmony. 12/20/03. I don't mean to infer that you have infinite amount of time to catch the 4 o'clock matinee, or infinite amount of time to watch one episode of Hee Haw Hour. Obviously, such things as this are by definition constrained by time. I was referring to something that goes beyond a soul identification with the manifestation that is Mark. I was referring to manifestation in general, which is simply a dimension of what I am. I have always and will always manifest in time-space, as that is my nature. Mark may be one flicker on the screen, relatively speaking, but I, as manifestation, is eternally expressing itself through the myriads of bodies that come and go. Seeing this makes it absolutely ludicrous to entertain such thoughts or feelings that Mark must accomplish this or that. It's ludicrous because the idea of Mark has been stripped of all importance that was once imagined. There is a subtle sense of desperation that comes from a soul identification with the person. It becomes an all-important matter that Mark get enlightened or make $1 million when you put all your eggs in this one basket. So really, what I was getting at was that I am manifesting through everybody simultaneously that has or will ever exist. And it is through the gift of time-space that I get to experience these incarnations one at a time. Who cares what Mark gets, as this is just one story in the book of life? I really don't feel like I have to do anything right now. That is what I mean by having all the time in the world. It's kind of the difference between the guy who is convinced there is no tomorrow and the guy who has seen that there will be infinite tomorrows. The first guy will experience life with a sense of desperation, however subtle, and the uneasiness of feeling this or that must get done. And the second guy will experience life with the sense that he has all the time in the world to do whatever he wants because the tomorrows never end. But really, it's not even about that. I'm not implying a subtle holding on to the prospect that one day in the future or in the past you will get all the things that you want. It's actually quite the opposite. It's more about not feeling that you're missing out on something, not feeling a sense of lack because your words don't glow like Ramana Maharshi, not feeling a sense of disappointment because you never made the $1,000,000 that Trump made, not feeling the sense of inadequacy because you can't play basketball like Michael Jordan, not regretting that you did this or did that or didn't do this or that. Instead, it is about living your actual life, complete with no sense of waiting for something else. This really is it. You're here. Right now, in this very moment, is the divine in action. So yes, there are only so many ticks on a clock until the baby must be fed. But as far as looking into the future for some sense of completion, then there is no need at all, as you are and have always been, the timeless. So enjoy your permanent vacation, because as the timeless, you literally have all the time in the world. All right, now I write a reaction to that. What's going on is these were letters that I was writing on a discussion forum, and the people were not feeling what I was writing. They felt like I was being callous, not taking in people's feelings into consideration. So these letters are continuing dialogue with people on that conversation. So after these letters were compiled, I wrote some comments, and this is some commentary that I wrote. As freeing as that realization was, it also had a somewhat disturbing side to it as well. I had always had the vague assumption that the ultimate goal of the spiritual path was to achieve some nirvanic plateau that would end in an everlasting bliss as the great Om. To find your place in the cosmic puzzle and then rest in peace for the rest of eternity was the unconscious fantasy. But what was becoming uncomfortably apparent was that there was no escape from existence. Somebody else who must have realized this for themselves captured the sentiment perfectly on a bumper sticker that I once saw. It read, "If you thought the idea of death was scary, just wait until you find out that you can't die." Reading that bumper sticker made me realize that in general, some people may claim to want immortality or to live in heaven or nirvana forever. But if they actually contemplated the actual implications of forever, then they would surely realize that any particular existence that actually lasts forever would eventually be experienced as hell. Forever is not just a super high number beyond billions and trillions, but instead it's literally never, 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 ever, ever, ever ending. Ever. The only reason that I don't find it hellish to know that I can't die is because I realize that Mark is just one particular existence among countless others. I don't exist as Mark, and thank God, as that would be an absolute nightmare. Instead, I exist forever as everyone in existence, one perspective at a time. And again, I wrote a note saying that this is another example that we could see the wisdom of ignorance. Reality life would be insane if it just lasted forever, ever and ever and ever. But because of the river forgetfulness, because of reincarnation, because of transmigration, because of ignorance, we have the appearance of being born, of being fresh, of starting over, of not having memories, of not having the sense of the infinite time with us. So once again, we see the wisdom in ignorance, or forgetting, just not seeing everything completely. The way I see it is that when I truly am, the way that I see it is that what I truly am could be likened to a TV screen. I am the TV screen, and what happens in the screen is the life of Mark. No matter what happens to Mark inside the screen, nothing could affect the screen itself. The TV screen always remains untouched and unaffected by whatever takes place inside of it. When the life of Mark ends, it may be the death of Mark, but it is not the death of the screen that contains Mark. When the TV show that I call Mark ends, a new show will begin. Just like when Seinfeld's show ends, it's followed by the Oprah show, then the Johnny Carson show, etc., etc. Even though each individual show has its separate existence, independent of the other TV shows, they are all happening on the same TV screen. As far as the individual TV show, there is a beginning and an end, but to the TV screen itself, it is only the space or the capacity for the shows that come and go, and therefore the screen itself is not subject to change. Again, it is and it isn't. That's why we have to get to know both sides of the circle, the unchanging side and the changing side, because we are both sides completely, and going through life not recognize that is going through life with incomplete seeing, which again I said is perfect because ignorance is perfect. But if you're interested in this, you're interested in enlightenment, which means seeing things completely. That post would essentially be the last thing that I ever wrote, except for a last flurry of posts that spanned over a month in 2005. So that was it. What I just wrote was pretty much the end to my writing. I went through a phase from, let's say, 99 to 2003 where I wrote a lot. After that, it was done. As I said, there was a last flurry of posts that I'm about to read that span over a month in 2005. But I think after that, that was it, until I picked up the idea of writing for the book in 2011. Then I wouldn't say so much writing, some writing, but a lot more organizing and fleshing out ideas and thoughts. All right. So that post would essentially be the last thing that I ever wrote, except for a last flurry of posts that spanned over a month in 2005. We had been living out in the mountains for nearly a year at this point, and the more I spent time in the forest, the less I enjoyed thinking about things, let alone writing about them. I spent all my time just observing and learning from nature. The more I observed the behavior of my natural surroundings, the more I could see how nature could always be trusted in the long run. By isolating particular moments of nature, one could easily make an argument that nature is cruel and dumb. But the longer amount of time that you spent observing any particular aspect of reality, the more apparent it becomes that nature has a way of learning and adapting in a way that furthers the evolution of life as a whole. Sometimes in nature, you see that you must take a few steps back to ultimately further life. But in time, even those steps back are revealed to be a necessary part of the movement forward. It was observations like this that prompted me to write these final letters in response to the topic of the perilous times that we are currently living through. It's interesting, in 2004, how crazy people thought the world was back then. But I wanted to add something to that. Let's see here. All right, I'll continue. 8105. On this forum, I've often referred to the last part of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they find God's message written to mankind, and it simply says, "Sorry for the delay." Well, I usually joke when saying that that is the secret to the universe, but I really don't find it to be a joke for myself, except in the sense that I do find it funny. I've said this over and over again, but I think it bears repeating. If you want to blame something or find the source for all apparent problems in the world, then look no further than time. I swear to you that time is the only variable that makes anything look hellish. From the narrow perspective of the temporal view, of course things will often appear to be nightmarish. You're only seeing a part of the picture and not privy to the full context, and it is this basic ignorance or partial seeing that is at the root of all suffering. Ironically enough, it is also through time that these apparent problems will ultimately and eventually work themselves out and reveal that what we once considered to be problems were never problematic in the first place. They were simply just natural stages of development. It was just a matter of nature following its due course, allowing the base to naturally bear its fruit. I'll give you another example of how I see this, because I already see myself getting lost in abstraction. Let's say that Joe realizes the self and has a very ecstatic experience, and now recognizes that he is all there is and all that could be. Joe goes to his Zen master and informs the master that he has perfect enlightenment, and he will now finish the remainder of his life silently in the woods, as there is nothing to do and nothing to attain. The master reminds him of the Bodhisattva vow and informs the student that enlightenment is only the beginning, and now he must go back to the world for the sake of all sentient beings. The student laughs at the old man, pats him on the head, says, "Thanks for the good times," and then heads out to finish his life in the woods being silent. Okay, so my point is simply that this is not a problem for Joe, and I would not be moved to interfere with his decision whatsoever. At this point in time, this is obviously perfect for Joe, and part of that perfection may mean a lot of pain for Joe, as he will likely discover a spontaneous impulse to share and participate with others, only to find no one around. I find that life is always gravitating towards harmony in all circumstances, and it is only a matter of time until Joe naturally and spontaneously recognizes his erroneous thinking and returns to the master for some consultation as far as what to do after enlightenment. I find this to be the case in all circumstances in life. Whatever anyone is concerned about, or whenever anyone is concerned about others' actions, no matter how destructive, I see no concern, because time has shown that it's all just part of the natural process, and part of that process necessarily entails ignorance, destruction, pain, violence, resistance, etc. It's all part of it, and to mistrust any particular aspect of manifestation is to deny reality as a whole, as it actually is. These sentiments, all right, now I continue. These sentiments did not sit well with everyone. What about the preservation of humanity's body? Don't I care about the good guys who are falling victim to the bad guys? Why would I not want to fight for what is just and good? These were now the questions that were asked of me. So again, I'm writing this on a forum, and again, I'm not getting a good response. We're in heated times, 2004, we're going to war with Iraq. Things are crazy. People have definite ideas, definitely choosing sides, and didn't like the direction I was going in, which I think is extremely fortuitous of what's going on right now. Like I said in the last one, we're at the peak of tribalism, people taking sides and thinking that there's absolutely no room for the other side to exist. So I love the timeliness of this. I wrote all this in 2005, 2020. This is pertinent to what's going on right now. All right, so we continue. 8205, August 2nd, 2005. So this is me responding to other people taking their self-righteous stand about their position, whatever it is, and criticizing me for not taking the stand of the good guys, whoever the good guys are. All right, so this is my response. Don't you think that anyone that takes sides naturally feels justified by their own actions or their team's actions? Surely the Serbian general takes himself to be the hero in his story, and in order to preserve his idea of humanity's body, he would naturally feel justified with his violence, just as the rebels consider themselves to be the heroes in their story and would in turn feel justified with their violence. Don't you realize that Bush actually thinks that he is the hero in his story and therefore justifies killing in the name of? Just like bin Laden feels justified killing in the name of? Hitler felt justified for killing in the name of. Nixon felt justified for killing in the name of. Mao, same deal. The guy who bombs abortion clinics, I'm sure he feels justified in his acts. Police brutality? Justified. Vandalizing SUVs because they're bad for the environment? Justified. Beating up a bully? Of course, he's a bully. Go get him. As long as self-preservation is the main agenda, then yeah, you will continue to feel justified with any actions that preserve your idea of humanity. That's just natural. Nothing wrong with it. Just the human drama unfolding, rising and falling. It's obvious why one would want to preserve humanity, as this is what most identify with. Nothing altruistic about that. And humanity seems, from here, to be just another form, more appearances and more thoughts. All right, I want to go back to something. Before, when you saw me trying to think about something when I was writing something, but I couldn't remember it. This just triggered the memory. This is how evolution works, and this is what I mean by the perfection, even when things look horrible. So everything is always evolving. And so let's call progress, a line up. We're going up. Let's just say, for the sake of my description, progress is up. But evolution is progress, and so evolution works like this. It's up, and then it scoops back down, goes back up, scoops back down, goes back up. So what I'm saying is that evolution, progress, is always good, and always going ahead. And sometimes what going ahead and progress looks like is this. And this is still part of it. Going up is part of evolution. Going back down is part of evolution. Going up and then going down is still part of evolution and going up. Because when it starts up and it comes back down, it goes up higher. And then when it comes back down, it doesn't go all the way down. It just scoops up higher. So it's always getting higher, but it always does scoop back down to pick up what was left unpicked up from the first time. So that's what I mean by ignorance is perfect. Everything is perfect. Even the bad things are perfect. Everything is always evolving. Even if it feels like we're devolving, that's part of the evolving. Because evolution looks like this, going down and up and down and up. It's always constantly going higher, but it's scooping down as it goes up. All right. So coming from this perspective, thoughts of self-preservation are seen as just that, thoughts. Nothing wrong with self-preservation or trying to preserve the human race or whatever. It's just more thoughts. No thoughts are better or worse than other thoughts, unless you deem them to be. But even that is still just another thought. All right. Well, I should have seen where this was going. It seems that any time that you express sympathy for the devil, the gauntlet gets thrown down in the form of, oh yeah? Well, what if a murderer tries to kill your wife and daughter? Would you choose sides then? 8305, I continue. I'm not criticizing the natural tendency towards self-preservation. That's why I refer to it as natural, and even said nothing's wrong with it. My point is that although I would choose my daughter's life over the life of a would-be murderer, this would only be so because of the identification that I have with her. Saving her life and taking the life of this murderer would be an act of self-preservation on my part, as I naturally have come to identify with my daughter and not him. By saving her, I am simply preserving that which I identify with. But not for one moment would I be operating under the false pretense that she is intrinsically more valuable than this murderer. I simply recognize that I deem her more valuable because of the identification that I have with her. Again, it's nothing altruistic about this. It's just a natural response to preserve the self. What I was addressing in your question was the implication that some people, or maybe groups, are intrinsically better for mankind, and not just believed to be better. I mean, beliefs are fine. I have many myself, but to actually believe your beliefs, that's a whole other story. Okay, so let me address the whole Hitler/Mother Teresa deal so you could see where I'm coming from. I think what was going on is a person was arguing with me saying, so you're going to put Hitler up there with Mother Teresa, saying that he has the same value as Mother Teresa, and why should I give him the same compassion as Mother Teresa? So this is my response. All right, so let me address the whole Hitler/Mother Teresa deal so you could see where I'm coming from. Within the context of the conversation where you seemed to be weighing the intrinsic value of human lives, you point out that Hitler and Mother Teresa are different. Presumably, Hitler is the villain in your story and Mother Teresa is the hero. So, you have the classic battle between good and evil. But the way I see it, you can't separate good from evil or Hitler from Mother Teresa. They are an inseparable whole that completely rely on each other for each existence. JP. Do you really think that the likes of Hitler occur in a vacuum? Do you think that he was simply born as the pure embodiment of evil that should have been destroyed right there in his crib? Or do you think that the horrible abuse that he suffered as a child at the hands of his own parents contributed in any way to his pain and the coping skills that he employed to avoid the unbearable pain that he suffered? So many factors come together to create all kinds of different people, and my impression is that anyone that is deemed bad is simply misunderstood, and there is a perfectly natural reason for why they are as they are. I have no reason to believe that I would have been any different than Hitler or Mother Teresa if I was born with their same genetic code into the same circumstances that they lived with. I am, after all, the same pure, undifferentiated awareness as they are. How could I be any different given the same circumstances? It's all reality, and that's good enough for me. Part of reality is that you cannot have the sweet without the bitter, and it is the ignorance in denying this natural truth that brings about so much pain in this world. Take, for example, a birth. If you ever witnessed a baby coming into this world, you would have witnessed horrible violence, where there is flesh being ripped, tearing of the muscles, blood splattering everywhere, baby crying, mother screaming in agony, etc., etc. By isolating one snippet of that process as a whole, one may make the case that there is a horrible problem, or perhaps even a curse, where something has gone wrong. But by broadening one's perspective to include the whole event, you realize that without this horrible pain, there could be no joyous smile as your eyes meet your newborn baby. The joy and the pain are part of the inseparable whole. Just as Hitler and Mother Teresa are inseparable, as is the idea of good and evil. I think I may have said this before, but what I'm talking about is a perspective of inseparability. So when I look at the classic yin-yang symbol, I can't help but to notice, or I can't help but to see just one thing, a triune. The black and white are not connected or unified, but rather one symbol. You have to engage in thinking to separate the black from the white, and even then, the only division is in your imagination. Do you think that the black part or the dark part of the yin-yang should be suppressed or rejected? What about the white part? Is one aspect of the yin-yang better or worse than the other? If everything is already self-perfected and Hitler exists, then what does that tell you? Hitler's reality. And your reaction to Hitler's reality, and these words are reality, and it's all reality. If Hitler, as you say, expresses the complete absence of love, and Mother Teresa is, as you say, a personification of love, then wouldn't your love and compassion be better spent towards he who is lacking rather than she who is apparently swimming in the stuff? And this reminds me when I was growing plants. I found that when you grow plants, if you injure a part of the plant, if a certain node becomes a part of the plant, all the energy goes towards the injured part, the ignorant part, the part that's suffering. That's natural. The healthy parts are healthy, and the sick parts, the ignorant parts, they need that extra energy, that extra love. So we continue to 8405. I don't recall choosing to love anybody. It just happens, and then I take notice. Perhaps it may seem that some choose to not love, or as you say, darkness, but do you really think that they could help the fact that they find themselves afraid to love for whatever reason? I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say that I'm walking down the street and I come upon an ice cream parlor and I decide to go inside. Did I really decide anything, or am I just spontaneously attracted to ice cream and I find myself saying, yeah, that sounds good, let's go get some? Only in retrospect can I imagine that a choice was somehow made. But let's go a little deeper. Let's say that I'm undecided on what flavor to choose. So I think about my choices. When I finally decide to choose strawberry, is there really a choice made? Or can I just not help the fact that I'm apparently more attracted to strawberry at that moment? I find myself uttering the words, I've decided on strawberry. But the truth is that I just discovered that what I naturally feel most attracted to is strawberry. I can't help it. That's just what I seem to want. Even if you try to censor yourself or say, no, I changed my mind, can you really help the fact that you spontaneously felt compelled to try something else? This is not a position that I'm taking. I'm not a fatalist that I'm aware of. Actually, I'm not even smart enough to know what these philosophical positions refer to anyways. But I have had some experiences in the past that have emasculated any sense of choice that I once had. That is also why I don't place much importance on enlightenment. For some, it seems to naturally be important for, and not with others. I don't imagine that they have any more control over these spontaneous longings than I have over mine. So what I'm saying there is that where I may place importance on enlightenment, I don't deem it intrinsically important that everybody should be interested, as other people are attracted to things that they're more naturally attracted to. I also have gotten the clear impression that nature is always gravitating towards love and harmony. That's why I trust life so implicitly. No matter how things may appear in time, I trust that everything is fine and naturally gravitating towards love, no matter how ugly things may seem when viewed from a temporal perspective. That is why I find pain to be so valuable. Pain for me is the insurance that no one could ever stray too far from this love, because the very nature of this pain will eventually and necessarily lead everyone back to love. Everyone in their own time. I continue at 8:06:05. I write, I do acknowledge that what you refer to as a problem or evil. I just experience or interpret them differently. What some refer to as problems or evil, I see as birthing pains or the natural cocooning process. For me, the cocooning process represents darkness, sleeping, ignorance, or maybe what you refer to as evil. But the reason that I don't view this cocooning process as evil is because through time, it becomes apparent that the cocooning process, the ignorance process, the sleeping process, is what gives rise to the butterfly, who now has a gift of flight, a whole other dimension, the next step in the evolutionary process. If it were not for this darkness, or the evil, then there is simply no evolution, no birthing pains, no baby. No birthing pains, no baby. That's it. You got to take the parts you got to take the whole. You can't isolate the parts from the whole. You're not seeing the whole picture. If you're not seeing the whole picture, you're ignorant and you're suffering. All of life is much like the caterpillar. Perfect, just as it is, with no need for any modifications. It is perfectly natural for the caterpillar to enter the cocoon phase, the cloak of ignorance. But focusing on this phase alone, one may mistakenly conclude that something has gone wrong with the caterpillar, and he needs rescuing from this curse called the cocoon or the ignorant phase. But through time, it is revealed that from this cocooning phase, the already perfect caterpillar now has an even broader perspective, wings, that could never have been realized without the cocooning phase. So what was already perfect is now much deeper in its perfection. The caterpillar, the cocoon, and the butterfly are, of course, one process, one continuum. But by narrowing your attention to just one isolated phase, one may get the false impression that something is amiss, something's gone wrong, when in fact, nothing could be more perfect. That is why I even deem evil as good, very good in fact. I mean, I see it all as good. You may even render my definition of good as meaningless. since I don't acknowledge any bad. But for me, it's all God or reality, and I guess the conditions are such that I just can't help but to see all of God as good. Whenever I hear the expression God's will, I take it to mean what actually is, or reality. So to be in conflict with reality is to be at odds with God's will. That's why I seemed to be taken up for Hitler and every other poor schlub that is rejected. Being from a Jewish family, my knowledge of Hitler is not very complimentary. But when all the talk stops, one thing is crystal clear. Hitler is reality and therefore God. That's why I understand when some people say that it's hellish to not be aligned with God's will. It's not a punishment or anything silly or personified like that. It's just an impersonal fact that if you are at odds with what actually is God's will, then you are by definition suffering. You're struggling. You're at conflict with what is. It's simply math. All right, so I continue on 8805. The way that I often explain it is like saying that we are like different sides of an infinite Rubik's Cube. Each side of a Rubik's Cube has the same colors, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, a little bit of red. But what makes each side unique is the particular configuration of the colors. Maybe one has a red, blue, yellow, green. Maybe this one has a red, 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 yellow, blue, red, red, blue, red. But we're all got the same colors, but we're just configured in a different way. So we all have blue, we all have yellow, we all have green, but the extreme characters like Hitler or Bush, they would have a whole bunch of, let's say, red, not leaving much room for the remaining colors. Obviously, I also have some red in my configuration, as does everyone. But given the vast variety of nature, there are bound to be certain configurations that just have an abundance of certain colors and lacking in others. The way I always look at life, and I'm probably going to say this a lot more times because it's central to the way I see things, is you could look anywhere. You could look out at a patch of grass, a field of trees, snow on the ground, sand on the beach, and look at every grain of sand, every snowflake, every blade of grass, every tree branch, every leaf. What they all have is in common is all the leaves, let's say, they all look identical to the other leaves, but slightly different. Same thing with the snowflakes. They all look the same, slightly different. Sand, all the same, slightly different. Leaves, branches, trees, everything they all look the same, but slightly different. So nature's trying out every single permutation, every single option, every single variable. So sometimes in nature, we're going to get clumping. And that's why we're going to have these anomalies like Hitler or Michael Jordan or Jesus, Gandhi, Bush, Trump. All of these rare figures are just a product of nature trying out every single configuration. Every single possibility is being tried. And sometimes you're going to get clumping or really odd configurations where sometimes you're going to get the opposite. Sometimes you're going to get perfectly balanced. Sometimes you're going to get slightly off. Every single variable is being tried in nature, and we're seeing the examples wherever we go. And I think that Bush, Hitler, Trump, like I said, Michael Jordan, Gandhi, Jesus, Buddha, all these people are just examples of odd clumpings that have, created one facet more than a balanced facet. All right. So, in this sense, there are bound to be anomalies like Buddha, Jesus, Bin Laden, Gandhi, Genghis Khan, Michael Jordan, Albert Einstein, Charles Manson, Martin Luther King, etc., that seem to be dominated by one particular color scheme. as this would naturally occur within the infinite amount of random configurations of the Rubik's Cube. But for the most part, we all seem to have a similar amount and balance of colors that what makes the mainstream still unique is our particular configurations of the colors. So, in this sense, the Rubik's Cube itself, the actual cube, refers to the one pure clear thing, the one pure awareness. And then the particular sides of the Rubik's Cube refer to the distinct expressions of the one. So picture a Rubik's Cube with infinite different sides, and that's what we are. We're all just infinite sides of this one thing. When I first experienced this, I described it as being water and experiencing yourself as vapor, then steam, then hot water, then cold water, slush, ice, etc. All of the different experiences are never not water. So while they are all different, depending upon their particular perspective, they are all ultimately the same. Again, it is and it isn't. Water, ice, steam, vapor, it is and it isn't. They're the same yet different. An interesting aside to this point, is to point out that I have found all of this to be happening simultaneously. Right now, at this very moment, the reader of these words is simultaneously an individual experience and the one itself. There is no future day where the many will converge with that one, but instead it's all happening simultaneously. God damn, this is amazing. All right, so we continue on 8905. I hope that I'm not giving you guys the impression that I would be the guy that would walk into a Zen monastery and dump my ashes on the Buddha statue, ignoring a perfectly good ashtray, since it's all good. I mean, in retrospect, I could see why I would give off that impression, as I am frequently rattling off about how perfect everything already is, and you could do no wrong, etc., etc. But you have to put that in the context of everything I say, because it's impossible to say everything at once. So what usually comes out in conversations is our particular emphasis, leaving the rest to be assumed or deemed irrelevant at that moment. So, if I were to walk into a Zen monastery and I needed a place to flick my ash, then I would dump my ashes in an ashtray. And if one was not available, I would just dump them on my hand and wipe them off on my pants. And if I saw someone else dumping ashes on the Buddha statue, saying, it doesn't matter, everything's Buddha, this is the goodest place to dump them, then I would offer him an ashtray or offer my hand if none was available. I would try and help him understand the function of the Buddha statue, which is to be ornamental, and the function of an ashtray, which is to collect ashes. But here is where my emphasis seems to veer from tradition. And again, this is only based on my limited experience. If the guy still insists on flicking his ashes on the Buddha statue instead of the ashtray, then I have no problem with that whatsoever. That's perfect for him at that point in time. I have found through the course of my life that if you're suffering from a misunderstanding, ignorance, then it will inevitably manifest as pain, and this pain is our teacher. I'm not talking about a judgment system or a karmic boogeyman, but rather the impersonal fact that ignorance is naturally painful because its very nature is to be false or in conflict with reality. I have 100% trust in the process of reality, and it's only a matter of time before the guy naturally realizes the function of the ashtray and the function of the Buddha statue. At this point in time, reality is such that some will flick their ashes in an ashtray. Some will flick it on the Buddha. Some will flick it in their own mouth. Some will collect them for years and make decorations. And some, I hear, can even make them magically disappear before they hit the ground. But my point is that I love reality, the whole thing, as it actually is right here at this very moment, which includes everything. Which happened, I love reality as it actually is at this very moment, which happens to be a time where everyone is just flicking their ashes everywhere. Maybe one day no one will dump their ashes on the Buddha, and I would greet that day with open arms, as well as that will now be reality. I found that taking any position on anything is simply an attempt to define myself. Just more thinking, building, creating, invariably leading to more upkeep, protecting, defending, furthering, on and on, yawn. I continue on 9/13/05. I've seen one image of a Hindu goddess, I think her name is Kali, where she is using one of her hands to deliver her own baby, and the other hand is used to eat a baby, a bit different baby, I guess. Yikes. But as scary as that image is, I really liked it when I saw it because it was brutally honest. That's the way I see the planet. That's the way I see reality. That particular image seemed to best convey the very point that is my whole reason for ever writing. And that point is that you must take the good with the bad. That is, if you don't want to live in conflict with reality. If you love life unconditionally and accept the bad as equally as you accept the good, then everything is recognized as a good thing. With birth comes death. With pleasure comes pain. With happiness comes sadness. With gain comes loss. That's the nature of duality. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with duality. It's only when people reject or live in denial of the whole of duality in preference to particular parts of it that they suffer from ignorance. I finish with 9/14/05. It's kind of like the garden. All of the fruit are perfect in their own right, but they vary wildly. On the face of things, we may deem the sugarcane plant to be more superior to the lemon tree plant simply because it is more desirable, equitable, and useful than the lemon tree plant. But ultimately, this does not detract from the lemon tree's own perfection for what it is and what is its function in relation to the garden as a whole. Never mind the fact that someone else who may be suffering from an ailment that the lemon tree provides a remedy for would instead regard the lemon tree as far more superior to its frivolous friend, the sugarcane plant. It just tastes sweet. So, in the end, as much as I resonate with the non-dual perspective, I now see it as just another view that has gained more notoriety in some circles. But much like the sugarcane tree, it's not intrinsically better than any other view. And likewise, seeing everything as perfect is also recognized to be just another view. So, the very nature of seeing everything as already being self-perfected makes very clear that seeing everything as perfect is also just one view among many. Before I go on, I think I should point out that when I use the word perfect or perfection, I am not using the word in a positive or an affirming sense, but rather in the sense of simply not needing anything, of already being complete, not lacking anything, not necessary to modify, not trying to improve or to better, but instead just perfect as it already is. And actually, this is the last one. 9/16/05. I write, spiritual seekers claim to want enlightenment, but the evidence often points to the contrary. It's like the overweight person sitting outside of a gym and eating a candy bar, believing that he really wants to be skinny because he likes the thought of being skinny. But it's clearly evident that what he actually wants, enough to actually do something about, is to enjoy a candy bar while sitting in the shade, watching other people exercise. So, when someone says that they want enlightenment, all they have to do is simply observe their actions, and they'll inevitably find that instead, what they actually want, enough to actually pursue, is to be completely identified with form or thought. If one truly wanted enlightenment, then they wouldn't spend all their waking hours in a desperate attempt to obscure the enlightenment, with continually grasping at one thought after another. So it seems more practical to not take your thoughts to be true, but instead carefully examine your functioning and the fruit that it bears. The second point was that when you truly desire enlightenment, then you won't be able to prevent it no matter how much sabotage takes place. It'll happen so naturally and spontaneously that you may as well be a wind-up mechanism entering into a predictable phase of its performance. You will naturally thirst for silence and stillness, as if it were your last refuge. You will find yourself spontaneously losing interest in propping up this pseudo-me with a compulsive identifying. In other words, it'll happen on its own, without any doing on your part. When you get thirsty enough, you will drink, but not until then. When you are sick enough of the you will allow yourself to die. And that's what I mean by this whole thing being a suicide mission. Consider Alice of Alice in Wonderland. She enjoyed herself in Wonderland and indulged in make-believe until her heart's content. And then naturally, she tired of this nonsense as the experience has wound down, and then she only thirsts for the nonsense to come to a full stop. As a function, her time was simply up, and that spontaneously manifested as a desire to have no more nonsense. When you are truly done with the nonsense, then the desire to pursue it will spontaneously drop away. Again, if you truly want enlightenment, then you must be willing to unconditionally surrender everything that you have ever loved over to reality. If you truly want enlightenment, then you will find yourself naturally drawn to the existential burning flames of stillness. If enlightenment is what you actually want, then you will discover yourself spontaneously yielding to this great abyss. If you want to experience the light, then you must endure the burning. So, whether it be burning, dying, letting go over a cliff, surrendering, yielding, ceasing, or whatever word or phrase you prefer, the point is clear and self-evident. Enlightenment is only realized in your absence. Hence the suicide mission. Rest in peace. Thank you, and I'll see you with the last chapter next week.